Hi, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Connor.
And I promise this is interesting.
And man, is it really interesting to us, the subject that we are currently in the midst of covering.
Apparently.
Yeah. So for those of you that joined us in the last either episode or 2 episodes or how many episodes we're cutting it up into, we're talking about Movies.
All the best picture winners in the history of the Oscars.
In the history of film. Yeah.
And I watched every single one of them. And I thought for sure, this will just be a fun hour-long episode. And why I thought that, I don't know, because Connor and I both work in film and have a lot to say about every single one of these films on this list.
It's the one subject that you and I could really just chat about for hours without really much of an aim or direction.
Yeah, I forget how much of my life I have wasted on film until a movie is mentioned. And I go, well, I know everything about the way that movie was made.
I know about all the
history.
Came out
and the production company that made it that no longer exists.
Just to date this episode, current events, we live in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And I think the National Guard have been called into Los Angeles to deal with certain things. So,
fun.
So
maybe they'll show up.
Maybe they'll kick in our door.
Stay tuned. Let's see what happens when Lindsay is confronted with the National Guard. All right, let's talk about movies.
Oh, boy. Okay, so we left off on the year 2000.
We left off in the year 2000, which worked out for us.
It did.
So now we're going to 1999, and the winner for Best Picture in the year 1999 is Shakespeare in Love.
Oh, that's right. This was a big dramatic one because it was between Shakespeare in Love and Gigli, I think.
No way.
No, I think it was.
Gigli is lauded as the worst movie that ever
I know,
came
but when
out.
it came out, I believe it was up for the Oscar against Shakespeare in
Even
Love.
Ben Affleck and J-Lo don't like that movie.
I know. 1999 was a fantastic year for film, though.
I guess. I'll have to confirm that later.
Yeah. Okay, anyway.
But Shakespeare in Love, you'll never guess this, but Shakespeare falls in love and writes a play. And that's the plot of that movie.
Amazing.
I think if we had this on DVD when I was a kid, this movie would be a key part of my personality, and I would be much gayer as an adult.
Interesting.
But unfortunately, I watched it when I was 28, so I don't care. I don't even remember this movie, and I watched it a week before I wrote up this report. I'm struggling to remember scenes. All I remember is that it kind of looks like it was put through a dusty rose filter. And Gwyneth Paltrow was there. And all I can think about is her vagina scented candles.
Right. She sells those vaginal eggs, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
She's at that whole line, Goop. She also, one of my favorite things that Gwyneth Paltrow has ever done is when she tweeted out that she caved during COVID. She had a breakdown and she ate bread.
Oh, wow. How dramatic and terrible. She caved.
I got diabetes. I got type 1 juvenile diabetes, and Gwyneth Paltrow ate ciabatta.
And she probably had a worse reaction than you did.
I think she probably did.
Yeah.
I think that was a terrible day for her.
You have juvenile diabetes?
That's what they call it. Type 1 diabetes is juvenile diabetes because most of the time it shows up when you're a kid. Most people get diagnosed when they're 2 or 3 years old.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. There's no type 1 adult diabetes. It's all
It's
type
very strange when it comes on later in life.
Yeah.
But the number of COVID cases are going up. Anyway, Shakespeare in Love. I didn't care about this movie. Do you remember this movie?
I've never seen it.
No. Every gay person I know loves this movie.
That is the one thing I know about Shakespeare in Love. I've heard every gay friend I've ever had has talked about that movie at some point or one or another.
Yeah. It's like this and any movie with Cher in it.
Yeah. Or Prince.
I think Prince is too gay even for the gays.
Yeah.
I mean, at least my friends, they're like, well, we're not that gay. We're into Chapel Roan,
Right.
We're not into Prince.
Oh, gosh. You think Chapel Roan's going to start acting soon?
No.
No, you don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
God forbid.
Maybe she'll go the David Bowie route and do a couple of weird eccentric roles.
Like musical stuff?
Yeah, but I don't see her being like, I am living in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
I don't see her going
That's a good point.
the Adrian Brody route.
I know. I could see her being in a Muppets movie.
Yes.
I think she'd have a lot of fun in a Muppets movie.
I agree. That might be pretty cute, actually.
The Muppets are great. I love the Muppets in a lot of ways.
We're talking about everything except for this movie, which I think tells you exactly how we feel about this movie.
Absolutely.
All right, 1998, Titanic.
The historically the biggest movie of all time when it came out.
A glacier breaks up a raunchy affair between a broke con man and a rich hoochie.
A rich hoochie.
Yeah.
Who was the hoochie in said movie?
Kate Winslet.
Kate Winslet, that's right.
How do you feel about this movie?
I've got a lot of opinions about the Titanic, and the biggest one being it represents the vanilla paste of movies. It is entirely average, which there's some really interesting stuff, like filmmaking wise, going on, where I had to watch it a couple times to catch it. It's like there are small moments where there are big things happening or small things happening that have big consequences, storytelling wise, where, we see like him use his knife and the knife becomes a relevant thing later on. And it's kind of the classic, like Hollywood close up on the knife, and the knife isn't relevant until an hour and a half later.
Chekhov's gun.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's very like classical cinema. You know what I mean?
It's not breaking conventions of storytelling
Not
by
at
any
all.
means.
No.
It's just using them well.
Yeah.
That's what Titanic does.
Well, and that's James Cameron in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for Jim Cameron. He's a filmmaker's filmmaker at its core.
I have heard people say that it is incredibly difficult to work with James Cameron because he's incredibly particular and, no offense, a dictator.
Yeah.
And what's frustrating is you'll be like, okay, fine, you want to sound design this thing so specifically, why don't you do it?
And then he does.
And then he can. Yeah. He can do every job on a film set better than the person who's doing it.
And that's got to be really frustrating.
And that is very frustrating because the one piece of leverage you have as not the director is I'm here to do my job that you can't do.
Exactly.
And James Cameron can do your job.
Exactly. And I think that is kind of an old school, like 90s director thing. We also see that with like, oh gosh, what's his name? He directed the Spy Kids movies, Robert Rodriguez. He's got a similar reputation in Austin where it's like, he'll do anything on set and he'll just fire you if you don't live up to the expectation that he's got. You know what I mean?
Rough.
And he'll just be in your business a lot. And it can be super frustrating.
Micromanager.
Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of people that watch this aren't going to be working on set typically. But when you're on set, you have a specific job. And, we have unions on set. And the unions are very specific about you stay in your lane. Like,
yeah. We're all here to help each other and collaborate on a project, but like I, as a script supervisor, cannot interfere with electrical work.
Exactly.
And like the electrician cannot help the gaffers do their, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like you have to stay in your own.
You would have to kill a grip before he touched a camera.
Dude.
Like, truthfully. And even
don't even go near it.
No. I remember we had a BTS photographer on the Weird Al movie. And we were shooting at the Virgil, which is kind of a historic like biker bar in Los Angeles, and our camera was set up to where it was back. The back was on the top of the bar, and the lens was facing up, right? Because we were taking a second, we were just taking a beat to get the scene rolling. And our BTS photographer leaned over, and he took a picture. He was taking pictures like from where the camera was going to be, and he leaned against the where they pulled the drafts for the beer.
Oh.
I don't know. What do you call those things?
I don't know. Handle.
The draft handle. And he leaned against it and it poured beer for like 5 seconds directly onto the lens of the camera. And our lesbian first AC, I've never seen someone who would wanted to split the world in half. Like she was so upset. But she sprung into action, got everything taken care of. We didn't lose the camera. The lens was totally fine. But she had a word with the AD department at the end of the day of like, hey, this guy needs to take a walk. He can't be near us. He's all up in our stuff.
Yeah. Camera team, by the way, has a particular reputation of being like the cool guys on set. Camera team is like where all of if you think of a hot film bro, I guarantee you he works in the camera department.
Yeah, they've got like hiking gear and they bring their own cups.
They've got tattoos. And they're tall and lanky and very smart about technical things. And like they are a clique. They stick together and they protect the camera like it is the baby in the movie Ice Age.
Yes.
And that's the thing. So anytime as a script supervisor, I have to ask like, what lens are we using? What's the plan here? They look at me like I'm an outsider. Like I literally just wandered in off the street. And I'm like, I've been sitting behind you for 6 days. Like I'm not new here.
But anyway, so yes, I've heard James Cameron is really tough to work with.
And probably like the worst husband ever.
I mean, he's been divorced 5 times, I believe.
Stop getting married.
I think he's on his 5th marriage. Yeah.
Women everywhere, you cannot change him. You can't change him.
Which, again, my thing, my friends back home have heard this rant from me in a lot of times, which is the Titanic to me is a perfectly average movie. And that means that it attracts a perfectly average crowd. So it is not ultimate cinema, right? At the top end of the bell curve. And it's not terrible. It's not at the bottom end of the bell curve. It's right in the middle of the bell curve. And because of that, it can't do anything boundary pushing. It can't do anything that's crazy. The boundary it pushed when it was released was that it was the biggest movie at its time.
It was huge.
Right?
Yeah.
The fact that they were doing the Titanic, it's like a lot of things in film. We were kind of talking about this off camera, but you went through all the Best Picture winners. Film is not an old art style. It's a relatively new art style.
New.
As far as all the arts are concerned, this is the newest art style I think we still have. Like music is older than film.
Everything
right?
is older than film.
Everything's older than film. So in that, I think you find a lot of things where this wasn't the best, it was the first. This was the first movie they made about the Titanic, right?
Yeah.
And so it was the biggest.
We talked about this last time. Novelty in film gets you to the Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the strongest point of Titanic is the premise.
Yeah.
Two people meet and fall madly in love on the Titanic. And that's a great premise because we as the audience know that the Titanic is going to sink.
Exactly.
So we know that this is doomed. This is Romeo and Juliet. We've been telling the same story forever. We love knowing what the characters on screen don't know. That makes things feel very tense and very exciting. And Titanic is like a subject that interests everybody's dad. It interests school teachers. It interests like niche historians like Connor and I. Like it does have this wide-ranging appeal. And then you cast Kate Winslet, who is the most beautiful woman in the entire world, and Leonardo DiCaprio, who I guess has some kind of appeal to someone somewhere. And you just have an absolute hit, dude.
That's a really good point, though. Is it's the cross-pollination of audiences, right? It's
yes.
like you hear that with like when you read about the Elvis Presley's manager. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we sell black music to white people? Right.
That's how do we bridge that gap?
How do we bridge the gap? And I think what you're saying about the Titanic is totally right, which is the Titanic historically interests a lot of people like James Cameron, a lot of dads, a lot of middle-aged guys who are into history, who are into tragedy, who are into big like things blowing up. But he not only made it appeal to them, he made it appeal to women. Like mass appeal to women.
Exactly. That's
genius. That's the thing. That's why I respect James Cameron as a filmmaker. He is a business guy. He really understands the business side of film.
Yeah, he approaches filmmaking like Taylor Swift approaches making music.
Yes, absolutely.
She's like, I know the biggest audience to go after.
Exactly.
And I know exactly what they want to hear a song about right now. She's got her finger on that pulse. She's like, I can be a 14-year-old girl. I can do that.
Right. Well, and I also respect James Cameron in a lot of ways he's just a weird guy with a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like part of his research for the Titanic was taking his submarine down to the Titanic.
Yeah, he's one of the, like, what's the word for it? He's one of the most respected, like, deep ocean explorers in the world.
Yeah, when that stuff
with... And also
with,
an Oscar award-winning director.
Right,
like, what a weird, random... This is what I want rich people to be doing with their money.
And that's the thing. I'll never shun James Cameron for that. I think it's like we need more of him in the world.
Bad husband.
Sure.
But great underwater explorer. You can't win it all.
No.
You can't also be an amazing father.
No.
You can't... You gotta have a weak point.
Gotta give some give and take. Yeah.
So it's fine.
That's the thing. I think the Titanic is one of those movies where future film students will study it. And I think it's a movie...
You think so?
I think so, only because of the cultural impact. Not artistically. It didn't push any artistic boundaries.
No.
But I think culturally, it was the first like big billion-dollar movie. It might have been the first. Maybe E.T. was the first. But the Titanic played in theaters, I want to say, for like 14 months. It had a 14-month theater run. Think about that.
We also got to think when it came out, 1998.
Yeah.
Movie theaters were still accessible for the everyman.
Yeah,
they're not accessible anymore.
That's true. So, but yeah, I think the Titanic is one that will live for a long time, only because of the scale and the historical relevance and the cultural relevance. And it's one of those movies that people will talk about as an influence later on.
You think so?
I think so. I
don't see it having that kind of impact.
Really?
I see, because like look at Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
Avatar, then again, another James Cameron movie, giant budget, beat Titanic out.
That's true.
For box office, for budget, everything. And nobody talks about Avatar like, wow, what, we need to study how this happened.
That's a good point, because the big thing about Avatar is its technology. That was I think we forget that in historical context, was that Avatar brought back 3D tech to film. Mm-hmm. And James Cameron was pushing that really hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Time will tell. I think Titanic is one of those movies that everybody knows and recognizes immediately, right?
I love Kate Winslet. I'll watch anything she's in.
Yeah.
She's really the only thing I like about this movie.
You don't like the steamy hand on the car window?
That's my least favorite part of that film. All right, 1997, the year I was born.
Ooh,
Hello.
Okay.
The English Patient.
The English Patient.
You want to talk about a movie made for women.
Yes, that is very true.
This taps right on my shoulder. As a nurse tends to a man who's just narrowly survived a plane crash, his life unfolds before his own eyes. Ralph Fiennes should be in every movie.
I agree with that.
That's my takeaway from this film.
I agree with that takeaway.
This is Ralph Fiennes in the 90s. I have to tell you, now, if you don't know who Ralph Fiennes is off the top of your head, I know you've seen this man before. He was in Schindler's List. He plays the Nazi.
Yeah.
And he was in my favorite movie of all time, The Grand Budapest Hotel, as the main manager of the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yes. And most humans on the planet know him as Voldemort.
Which is not a movie that ever comes to my mind.
Yeah, I know. You didn't grow up on the Harry Potter movies, so I think you forget that.
I just watched them for the first time with Connor last year.
You did.
And you know what? You need to be a kid. You need to be a kid at that midnight showing for it
to mean
anything.
It captures the magic.
He wasn't in those movies enough. That is the weak point. You have Ralph Fiennes as an evil villain with no nose. I need him on screen 100% of the time. I want more of him and less of Harry Potter. Who gives a fuck about this kid with a scar? I want Ralph Fiennes. He's evil. Why? I know it's for a good reason. Ralph Fiennes wouldn't do anything for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. He kills it in Harry Potter.
He's amazing. I think Ralph Fiennes is one of the best working actors right now. I think his body of work is incredible. He's in this movie, which came out in 96, won the 97 Oscar for Best Picture.
Yes.
And he is gorgeous.
Oh, I'm sure.
Some of the lines that I think a horny woman wrote this script because some of the things he says, oh my God, it'll stick with me forever.
Some Bridgerton type shit.
No, way better. Don't insult it like that. It is just incredible. And it just like falls out of it. That's what's amazing. He just like says it and he doesn't even have to think about it.
I know.
It just occurs to him. Oh my God.
I've never seen this movie, but I've heard exactly the sentiment, which is it's romantic and horny. Like
it's steamy.
Yeah.
Willem Dafoe is also in this.
Is he really?
What women helped make this movie
I know.
happen? This
That's
is
crazy.
like when Ocean's 11 was coming out, and I was like, okay, I see the casting director.
Yeah.
I see the dream she had and the vision that she wanted.
Yeah.
And she made it come to life for all of us.
Yeah. It's funny that, let me ask you this on a personal level.
Yes.
This is unrelated to movies.
I love questions.
What do you think is the relation between romance stories and women just going absolutely feral for good romance stories? Because we see that with The English Patient. Mm-hmm. We see that with the old kind of serial novels.
We see it with all the movies we talked about so far: Shakespeare in Love,
That's
Titanic,
true.
The English Patient, and a couple other movies on this list that we're about to talk about.
And the new advent of romantasy that's kind of taking book talk by storm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It seems like romance and fantasy and all these things are always, and Bridgerton was one of the biggest shows that was streaming for a long time.
Yeah.
Because
Taylor
of
Swift, she only sings love songs.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you asking me why women are so into romance?
Yeah, what's up with that?
I want to say this in a way. I feel bad. Sometimes I complain about men, like the big capital M men in my life, and I feel bad because you're in my life and I love you, and I just hope that you recognize that you're the exception.
Do you think I'm romantic?
Very.
Okay, good.
But I think most women who are dating or married to a man are one bad argument away from killing their husband or killing themselves.
I see.
The things I hear my girlfriends say about their boyfriends or the guys that they're dating, it's just bleak. I think a lot of men actually don't like women very much, but they insist on dating them, marrying them, having kids with them, and they just don't think very much about their girlfriend or their wife. They want to be like a free agent. They're like, I want to have kids that look like me and carry on my name. And I like the idea of always having a woman available so that if I ever am lonely or sad or need my taxes done, she's around, but I don't actually like her that much. So I just kind of want to do my own thing. And I think that's how a lot of relationships operate.
Yeah.
And so what women crave are these stories of beautiful, sick-ab, winged men who are like, I will go to hell and bring you back if you die before me. Women want to be chosen.
I mean, yeah, you can even see that with the story of Persephone, right? As far back as that, the story of Hades and Persephone.
Oh, that's a bad example.
Is it?
Hades just raped Persephone.
Oh, that's not the story.
Hades stole Persephone. And Persephone was so miserable in hell that she was like, I beg of you, let me go back to the world just for half the year. And Hades did love her in his own weird rapey way.
Right.
And said, okay, fine. And so that's why we have the harvest. We have spring and summer and everything grows. And then she has to go back to hell and the world crumbles and dies.
We'll probably cut this part out because I didn't know that about the Hades and Persephone story. I thought it was a romance.
No, keep it in. We're talking about the ignorance of men.
Yes. So yeah, I haven't seen The English Patient, but do you think it deserved the Best Picture that year based on the other movies you saw?
I'm not sure what other movies came out in 97, but I am a little surprised that it won Best Picture. I was watching it and I was like, this is a good, steamy time. There are some shots in this movie that really made me go, oh, but I think it mostly has to do with the actors. The actors in this movie just absolutely blew it out of the water.
That's cool.
Blew it
That's cool.
out of the water. Willem Dafoe and Ray Fiennes.
That's a crazy duo. I don't think I've ever seen them on screen together.
I'm going to make it happen again. I'm writing Ray Fiennes and Willem Dafoe, the movie. But yeah, I don't really know what to say about this movie. I remember some of the more flirtatious lines, and I remember a couple of shots of Willem Dafoe in a tank top, but I don't really remember much else.
Would you recommend this movie?
Yes, to a girlfriend who just went through a breakup.
Ah, okay.
With like a 10-year-long relationship. I would be like, watch The English Patient. All right, 1996.
Okay.
Who do you think won in 96? Do you know?
Gosh, I don't even know a movie that came out in 96, I don't think. Did Reservoir Dogs come out in 96?
I'm not sure. You should stick with the theme of the day. Shakespeare in Love, Titanic, The English Patient.
Chocolat.
Braveheart.
Braveheart, really?
A Scottish rebel unites his seething countrymen in a push against the oppressive, buck-toothed losers that are the English Empire. No movie that I have ever seen is complimentary towards the English Empire. That's what I wrote. There's no way to romanticize everything that happened in that.
No, not at all.
But Braveheart does an okay job of it. And also, like, it's one of the more historically inaccurate films on this list.
Just riddled with bullet holes of inaccuracy.
It doesn't even try.
But it is a movie.
It's a film.
That's the important thing to point out. It's like historical is in the biggest possible air quotes possible.
And you got to ask yourself, like, how do we make a movie about this time? Because we're talking about ancient Scotland.
Right.
And ancient Scotland got wiped out by the English Empire.
Yeah.
So the only records that we have are written by Englishmen. So even that is going to be riddled with inaccuracies, and they're going to tamper down some of the village burning and and
how heroic their heroes were.
Yeah. So there's really no accurate way to go about this. And we human beings have not historically been amazing at keeping accurate written records of things that happen. So I think if you wanted to make a movie about Scottish rebels, it makes some sense to just kind of make up your own story.
Yeah.
And at that point, I don't even know why they went with the name William Wallace, because William Wallace was a real person, real man who did real things. But this movie is like not even closely based to any of the things that he did.
From what I understand, it's the LaCroix version of like William Wallace's story, where it's like there are a couple things where it's like, okay, yeah, William Wallace had a story of him doing that.
Yeah, he was Scottish.
And he did fight the English.
He did.
And he did get killed by the English.
Yeah.
But everything else kind of up for debate, I think.
Yeah.
I watched Braveheart for the first time last year, and I remember thinking, wow, this is really long.
It's long.
It's really long. And I love Mel Gibson. I think Mel Gibson has a great presence on screen.
Such a great presence.
And he's a very good director. He's a really good director.
He does make interesting movies.
He does.
I mean, he makes movies about people suffering.
He does.
And just like rising up against the man. Like, those are the movies he makes.
That's the weird thing. For as many problems as he's been involved with in the last decade and a half or so.
Yeah.
His movies are just wonderful. Every time he releases a movie, it's just wonderful. Braveheart has a lot of heart to it. Like, it does. It really is a movie where it's like, man, you can't help, if your family comes from that part of the world, you can't help but feel something about it.
Yeah.
You know?
And the sweeping shots of Scotland, like unadulterated Scotland, just like wide open rivers and like enormous green mountains. It's foggy and misty like the entire time. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Like, cinematically, like, I think it's really easy to make a movie like this look appealing. All you have to do is like set up a camera with a tripod, and there we go.
Right.
There's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen.
Yeah. I think about like he also did Hacksaw Ridge, which you and I have talked about, which I love that movie. I think it's fantastic. But again, it's a beautiful movie about very problemed people, and I think Mel Gibson picks fascinating subject matter.
He really does. Yeah. Dark subject matter.
Dark, typically dark subject matter.
All right, 1995, the movie I can quote upwards, downwards, left, right, diagonally, Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
The chronicles of a book-dumb Alabaman who runs a lot, eats chocolate, and loves Nike Cortez white leather shoes.
He does. I was born in 1995, so that's a good year.
This is your movie. You are Forrest Gump, and I am the English patient. This is actually... okay, we might be on to creating a new Zodiac here.
I mean, that's technically that's the romance in Forrest Gump, I think, because Jenny is the English patient at a certain point.
Kind of, yeah.
Because she ends up dying.
Yeah, right.
Spoilers, but if you haven't seen Forrest Gump at this point, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, have you seen Forrest Gump?
Oh, so many times.
Yeah.
I remember, this is a funny thing. So you went to USC for your post-grad.
I did.
I went to USC when I was 16 for a summer program for non-college kids.
Yes.
Right. Which we call them high school kids, I believe. That's the official term.
Non-college kids.
Yeah. And our professors asked us what our favorite movies were. And I said Forrest Gump was one of my favorite movies. Because at that time, I hadn't seen a ton of movies yet, and I wasn't exposed to like what art house cinema was,
Oh my God.
And our Polish cinematography professor, who will go unnamed, said, I think that's a terrible movie. That the people who like Forrest Gump have awful taste in movies.
This is what's wrong with film bros is like you can't just enjoy a movie. Your favorite top 5 movies at any film school have to be all in black and white.
Right.
They have to be Japanese or Italian.
Right. Or French.
And they have to make no sense.
Yeah.
They have to be just like a picture of a puddle and then a mountain and then a man crying. And it's just that for 6 hours.
Yeah.
And you have to say that's your favorite movie.
I know that's kind of the thing that I learned at film school. I'm not sure if you ran into this because postgrad's a little different than like undergrad, I think. But there are varying degrees of film school student. And within your first year, you tend to watch all the classics and you say those are the best movies ever. You know what I mean? And a lot of film school people operate in that mutual exclusivity of if you like Forrest Gump, you can't like something else. It's like, so you can't like Forrest Gump. Otherwise you can't appreciate the 400 blows. It's like, that's not how movies work.
Why?
That's not how art works.
You could enjoy anything.
Yeah, exactly.
I like Forrest Gump mostly because it has nostalgic appeal to me. It
Absolutely.
was always on TV. It was something that everyone in the family liked, which was very hard to find because my dad liked Westerns and my mom liked like dysfunctional family dramas made in the early 2000s. And I liked comedies like with Chris Farley. So like anytime we had like that Venn diagram touched was a big deal. And Forrest Gump was one of like the 5 movies that everyone liked. Yeah. And I loved Tom Hanks and I loved the score and it got me into like 70s rock and roll and 80s music. And like so there's like a lot of appeal to this movie. I think it feels very friendly and it feels very safe.
Yeah.
And it really does just pull on I feel like I'm 9 years old whenever I'm watching it.
I remember we tried to show that movie to my granddad when he was still alive because everybody in our family was like, oh, this is just like Granddad.
Interesting.
Because Granddad was around in Korea. He went to Germany. He's seen he met Martin Luther King in an elevator once. Like he's met all these crazy people and been to all these intense like historical events just by happenstance. You know? So we thought, Forrest Gump, he's going to love it. He fell asleep in the first 5 minutes and said, this is an awful movie. And to me, I remember thinking about that and going, man, that's just how it is sometimes. Like it can be the best movie ever and it's not for somebody.
It just doesn't hit.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing.
There's a great story behind the making of Forrest Gump. So Bob Zemeckis wrote and directed this movie. And Bob Zemeckis is USC royalty.
He is. They have a building named after him.
He also made Back to the Future.
Yes.
And, he's been around for a long time. He's a Hollywood darling, as is Tom Hanks. So Tom Hanks and Bob Zemeckis really wanted to make this movie. And the studios just weren't sold on it. They were like, it's about a dumb guy throughout the decades. No, I'm sorry. We just made Braveheart.
Right.
So we're not.
Yeah, I don't care if it has a best-selling novel attached to it.
I don't care, yeah. And so Tom Hanks, who was at the peak of his 90s popularity at this time, took a massive pay cut because he wanted to make the movie. And we're like, we need crew, we need locations. This was not a cheap movie to make. I mean, the soundtrack alone is going to cost you a few $1 million. So he took a massive pay cut and said, all right, I'm going to work for a really reduced rate. You just give me like a good deal on the back end.
Yeah.
And because I really believe in this movie. And that worked out for Tom Hanks because that movie was always on TV when I was a kid.
A roaring success.
And he gets a little paycheck every time that movie
every
plays.
single time
and then it went on to win the Oscar.
Yeah.
So clearly Bob Zemeckis and Tom Hanks had their finger on the pulse at something.
They knew something was going on for sure. And
Yeah.
I do think Forrest Gump is a very sweet movie. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it in my mind.
No, and we were talking about wide appeal. It goes through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then into the 80s.
Yeah.
And that appeals to people who grew up in that time. Everybody wants to see their childhood.
Right.
Like written out. Like my mom is totally biased against movies for movies that are set in the 1970s because she's like, oh my God, it was exactly just like that. I used to party in the woods in high-waisted pants.
Right.
Like it's exciting. And I didn't get it until movies that are set in like the late or like the early 2000s started coming out. And then I was like, oh my God, like this is really cool. This is exactly what it was like to go to elementary school in 2001.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So there's something to be said about that. Speaking of 1994,
Here we go.
need to talk about who won the 1994 Oscars. Schindler's List.
Schindler's List, of course.
A businessman charms his way through the Nazi party so he can save over 1,000 Jewish prisoners from internment.
Starring
Liam Neeson.
That's right.
And Ray Fiennes.
Exactly. Ray Fiennes plays a great villain.
About Schindler's List?
Yeah.
It's brutal. I think I've seen it twice. I don't really ever want to watch it again.
We had to watch it in high school in my English class.
It's unflinching.
Yeah.
And I respect Spielberg for making it. Spielberg also never took any form of payment for this movie.
Did he really?
He considered it blood money.
Okay. I mean, fair enough.
Listen,
Fair enough.
I think he did lose family members in
He did. No, he did.
Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Because he is of that generation. So it was a very personal movie for him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's long and it's brutal and the acting is brilliant. It's a little spooky how brilliant it is when you're dealing with subject matter like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, dealing with World War II, anything is tough, especially when you start looking at the camps and the Holocaust generally.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, war movies, we talked about this with All Quiet on the Western Front, I think, in the previous episode, where it's like, All Quiet on the Western Front is a great movie that I hope I never watch again, you know, just because of how, like, deeply disturbing it is in a lot of respects.
It's strange. There are some movies that I recognize are dark and disturbing that I watch frequently. I watch Manchester by the Sea multiple times a year.
That's a heavy movie.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
My mom, she's like, I saw it once. It was great. I never want to watch it again because it's just too heavy and emotionally rough. But I do feel that way about Schindler's List, where I'm like, I don't ever want to sit down and watch Schindler's List again.
Yeah.
I do think it's a beautifully made movie, very carefully crafted. Very obviously, it feels woven if we're going to get into like pretentious art speak for a second.
It's the episode to do that.
It feels woven. It feels very much like Spielberg and his team approached it very carefully, and just like every scene and every line, it's all just like carefully pieced together.
Yeah.
And I love when movies are built like that. That's how I think movies ought to be built. It's like everything needs to be carefully woven together and on purpose, intentional. And I think Spielberg nails it. Also, is it Hans Zimmer that made the soundtrack to Schindler's List?
Potentially, yeah. We'll have to fact check that, but I think so.
Spielberg went to Hans Zimmer and they had an early cut of the film. And they said, we need you to score this. And Hans Zimmer watched it through and became very emotional and was like, there's no way to score this movie. Like, I'm not capable of scoring this movie. Wow. And Spielberg said, I know, but everyone who is dead. So then he did score it. And the score is absolutely gorgeous. Sometimes I hear that little violin and I'm like, sends shivers up me timbers.
This movie is kind of legendary in the film world, I think, for a lot of reasons, obviously. But the other fact I know about this is that they used to bring, Steven Spielberg used to bring his friend Robin Williams on set to do jokes during lunch to like loosen up things.
Yeah.
You know, that's what my roommates and I talk about. It's like, man, imagine the vibe on set. That's got to be brutal.
I think that about a lot of these movies, to be honest, because they are like epic dramas.
Right.
And there's a lot of money on the line, but then even more so just the subject matter that you're dealing with. I'm like, dude, we're talking about like the English pillaging of villages every day. we're out in like the wet fields and I'm just trying to eat a burger.
It's tough.
And it's tough, man. Like you have to keep the vibe somewhat up or you're just going to, every performance is going to be like, yes, William Wallace, I'm on my way. And you can't have a tired performance in Braveheart or in Schindler's List. You can't have Liam Neeson ever look like he wants to take a nap.
Exactly.
He can't nap. Not one time in that movie.
Yeah, and that's kind of, you get into the interesting thing about filmmaking, which is like the practicals of set morale and crew morale and keeping everybody's spirits up.
Yeah.
And
that was something we talked about a lot in theater school. We talked about ensemble and keeping the energy in the ensemble good.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to get along. You don't actually have to be best friends with people. You don't have to be roommates, but you do have to have like mutual trust and respect or it fucks up your performance.
Yeah.
And that sounds artsy woo-woo. It is actually true. You can tell when an ensemble is like somebody dated somebody and then they broke up and then whoops, then they started dating somebody else and the stage manager hates so-and-so. So you can feel it as an audience member. Yeah. Audience members are way more intuitive than I think a lot of performers and artists give them credit for. So if the ensemble is not built up, the story's not going to work.
I think that's true. I mean, do you remember that movie Fury? With Brad Pitt and Shia LaBeouf. And
yes, I never saw it, but I remember seeing billboards.
It was honestly a pretty decent movie. And the thing they got right with that was all the guys really felt like they were together.
Did they do any kind of like training exercises?
So they did. So for anybody who hasn't seen the movie Fury, it's about a tank crew in World War II, I believe.
Yeah.
It's a tank movie where they're all in a tank together. And so the energy has to be right. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it can't feel like these Hollywood guys just met yesterday and now they're in a tank.
Exactly. And I think what the director allegedly did was he would bring them onto set early and he would have them fist fight each other.
Oh, this is so great.
Yeah.
I love hearing stories like this. This needs to come back.
Yeah.
That was old school filmmaking. Francis Ford Coppola did that for The Outsiders.
Really?
He literally rented out a tiny house in Oklahoma and made Patrick Swayze and Rob Lowe and the actor who played Ponyboy live in the teeny tiny house together because he was like, you guys are like Hollywood starlets. No one is going to believe that you're broke brothers from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So you have to live in this house and bond and fight and be uncomfortable. And then like after a few weeks of like ensemble building, then we'll start recording the movie. And oh my God, that makes a world of difference. You watch that movie and you're like, yeah, these guys grew up together.
Yeah.
But it's Emilio fucking Estevez. He didn't grow up in Oklahoma.
No.
And it's Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
If you're making an ensemble movie, you have to build an ensemble.
Yeah. And so they do. They do that really well in that movie. And that movie kind of got forgotten, I think. But yeah, I mean, imagine being Shia LaBeouf and punching Brad Pitt in the face.
That sounds really fun, actually.
Yeah.
I feel like Brad Pitt would love that. He's from Oklahoma.
Yeah. Is he really? Mm-hmm. That's funny.
I know. Best thing Oklahoma ever did was make Brad Pitt.
So yeah, Schindler's List. Brutal movie. I think the word unflinching is the correct word to use.
And also, like, was it ever not going to win the Oscar?
Right.
All right. 1993. This movie's really good.
Oh, boy.
I like this movie a lot. Unforgiven.
Unforgiven.
A grizzled killer cowboy for hire goes on one last murder spree to avenge a local prostitute.
I've not seen Unforgiven.
Oh, my God. If you're going to give me a grumpy hero, give me Clint Eastwood. I can spend 10,000 hours watching that man scowl and not be bored. He is so awesome.
I guess I didn't realize he was still making cowboy movies in the 90s.
Yeah. This is one of the last Westerns I think he ever made.
Mm-hmm. He's still directing. That's unbelievable.
He is the grumpiest in this movie, and it's an absolute delight to spend 2 hours with him. I'm biased because this is a movie I used to watch with my dad, so obviously it's going to land in the top tier.
Right.
Again, this is a movie that kind of pleased the whole family.
Were you seeing, when you watched it, were you thinking, oh yeah, this is clearly a Best Picture winner?
It's so good.
Is it?
It is just such a great movie.
That's cool.
It's a movie that like kind of grabs you and then it doesn't let you go. Mm-hmm. And then the credits start to roll and you feel it like release your lapel. And you're like, I didn't realize it was gripping me that whole time.
Yeah.
I can sit back on the couch a little bit. It's beautiful. Yeah. It's a beautiful movie. It's a great story. I love spending time with Clint Eastwood. He's a real horseman. I love watching real horsemen get some screen time. And yeah, we got to watch Unforgiven. I can't believe you haven't seen it.
No, I never have.
Have you seen any Clint Eastwood movies?
Oh yeah, I've seen a couple.
Which ones?
The Outlaws of Josie Wales.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I've seen a lot of his modern stuff.
Yeah,
like contemporary films.
Yeah.
But
Gran Torino.
Yeah. The Mule. and a couple of the old westerns, like, Fistful of Dollars, a few dollars more. And I watched the cop movies. What were those ones?
Dirty Harry?
Dirty Harry, yeah. I didn't watch the whole Dirty Harry series. I think it's a series, but...
I think Clint Eastwood is at his best in the westerns.
Yeah.
That just feels like the environment where he fits. Clint Eastwood is a funny character to me because everything that he says and does is so opposite of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. There's really nothing glitzy about the guy. He's so like... it's weird. Like the camera's close on him and you feel like he doesn't want you to be looking at him.
Yeah.
It's like so interesting because he's so handsome and so awesome to look at. And you just get the feeling that he's like, don't look at me. Can I just leave me alone and let me do what I need to do?
Right.
It creates a really interesting tension with the audience watching it. So yeah. Oh, I'm so surprised you haven't seen it. We'll have to watch it.
Okay.
1992. This is also a really good one. Silence of the Lambs.
Ah, yes.
The only female FBI officer in the world is tasked with solving a string of vicious murders and is hit on by her weird, bug-eyed boss. I love this movie. This movie absolutely deserved Best Picture in 1992.
Yeah.
I don't know what else was nominated that year, and I don't care. It could have been Schindler's List. I vote Silence of the Lambs.
The first time I watched this, my uncle showed it to me when I was like 13 or 14, which I was probably too young to be exposed to Silence of the Lambs.
It's pretty intense.
My uncle, shout out to Uncle Bo, he's the one that showed me a lot of the movies I probably shouldn't have been watching as a kid.
Every story you tell about Uncle Bo is like that.
Yeah.
He's like, I probably shouldn't have been holding a gun, but I was 7 and with Uncle Bo, so it just happened.
He showed me Terminator. He showed me Silence of the Lambs.
Oh my God.
Showed me Heat.
Oh my God, this is like my friend Rhea. These are all of my friend Rhea's movie recommendations. Have you seen this weird movie about this android who comes to life and changes the world?
Right.
I'm going to send it to you for free.
But yeah, I know Silence of the Lambs because of Uncle Bo, and I watched it recently as an adult again, and like, yeah, it's really cool. It's really an interesting movie. It's unlike any movie that was being made at the time, and unlike any movie that's been made now.
Very unique. Totally singular.
It is.
Jodie Foster is just the right amount of ghostly.
She is, yeah.
She seems haunted. That's a great character.
And what's the story behind Hannibal Lecter? Was Hannibal Lecter a real guy?
No.
Was it a book?
I'm not sure, actually. I think Hannibal Lecter took a lot of inspiration from a few serial killers.
Right.
I'm sure there was some inspiration from Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
Because Jeffrey Dahmer ate people.
He did. The only reason I bring it up is because it's really rare in film that a character is created in film and then becomes kind of a life-sized thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's usually...
Hannibal Lecter's one of those.
Exactly. Hannibal Lecter is, because we had a couple of movies, a couple of spin-off TV shows. Mads Mikkelsen plays him at one point, and you just don't see that with movie characters all the time.
No, you don't.
Right? It's like, it's usually character is in the book and comes on the movie.
Well, I credit Anthony Hopkins for most of that because I think a lesser actor would have just played him like Sam Rockwell in The Green Mile.
Yes.
Which I'm not taking shots at Sam Rockwell because that character fits perfectly with that. But I think most actors would just be like, okay, he's crazy. He eats
evil.
People, and he's just going to be bouncing off the walls and like clawing at the concrete. And Anthony Hopkins plays him very refined, which makes it worse. He's very intelligent and stiff and cold and unreadable.
Hello, Clarice.
Yeah, and it's great. This shot is one of my favorites in movies ever. But she's walking through the cells of like the most guarded part of the prison. And like all these guys are jumping off the walls and they're like eating their own pee and it's just crazy. And then she turns the corner and there's Hannibal Lecter just standing straight as a board.
Right. With that kind of grandfatherly build.
Yeah.
On
I've
his
been
trousers.
Expecting you.
Yeah.
And he's very educated. He can draw beautifully. He's very cultured. He wants to travel. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for him because they trick him.
Yeah.
They trick him into thinking he's going to get a cell with a window. Mm-hmm. And then it gets revealed that was never going to happen. And I feel so awful. I'm like, why would you do that to him?
Yeah.
He just wants a window. I don't know how they made me care about a man who eats people, but I think, listen, I want to commit crimes and he did it. So who am I to judge too harshly?
Yeah. Yeah, I really like Silence of the Lambs. I do think it's interesting from a storytelling perspective because ultimately, Clarice doesn't really solve anything. It's Hannibal Lecter gives her all the pieces to solve the crime that she's trying to investigate because he like tells her to go to a storage unit, and then she has to look for the clues there.
That's not true. He gives her riddles, and she has to solve it. So but they do work together. They're like partners, which I think is another great testament to the writing, because a lot of scripts do this. They have amazing side characters, lush, funny, complex, and then the main character is white rice. There's nothing about them that sticks out. You're like, why am I seeing the world through this person's eyes? I'd literally rather see it through anybody else's eyes. And Clarice is not like that. I really enjoy Clarice. Clarice has personality.
She does.
She's haunted. She has a past that she's kind of like running from. She's very intelligent. I really credit the writing for making sure that character doesn't just feel flat and boring.
She doesn't fade into the background, which
Not at all.
Could have been really easy for them to do.
Very easy. It's easy to do in any other circumstance. And then if she's the only woman in this story, really. And I think it would be especially easy to just make that her only character
trait.
Which
they go into that, but it's not the only thing that's happening.
It's pointed out visually when she's the only woman in the elevator.
Yeah.
And she's wearing the FBI sweatshirt. You're like, I get it. She's an FBI agent.
Right.
She's the only woman in the office, probably, who's not a secretary.
Well, and that's the thing. We see this in kind of older movies, especially in the 90s, where this is what we call filmmaking, like visual filmmaking, where the whole thing is the opening shots are her running through the FBI headquarters, right, of like on the training camp. And she's trying to keep up, and she's trying to train and be stronger. And I think it's shown that she is not as strong as most other guys that work for the FBI. And then that's the opening scene. And then the closing scene is her dealing with Buffalo Bill in a physical altercation and her winning because she's smarter than he is.
I don't know about that interpretation of the opening scene because she's alone.
She is alone
on the obstacle course.
Yeah.
So you don't know if she's way ahead or if she's way behind or if nobody else is running on the course. So the whole thing is like she's kind of cutting her own path here.
Yeah, she's independent.
And then she goes back, and I think at some point she's running against a group of men, like they're coming this way and she's going that way. But that whole opening scene is kind of disjointing, whatever word, but it's a little strange because she's alone in the woods.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know what she's doing.
That's the thing. I interpreted that as she's out there early because she knows she needs a little bit of extra work.
Could be.
You know, that was my interpretation.
Right.
But the way that she solves and finishes the whole thing with Buffalo Bill is not through her physical power.
No.
It's through intelligence and it's through skill, right?
Interesting.
And I think it's a very cool connection all the way through.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I like that. That's interesting. Oh. We got to talk about 1991.
Okay.
Dances with Wolves.
Oh boy, the inspiration for Avatar by James Cameron.
Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, but with humans.
Yes, that's right.
It's set in the Great Plains during the American Civil War. We follow Kevin Costner, who is a lieutenant in the Union Army, and he encounters members of the Sioux Nation and pretty quickly becomes enamored with their way of life, and thus his character journey begins.
This movie gets a lot of flack for a lot of correct reasons.
What have you heard?
Well, just that it's that whole. I think we talked about the whole thing with like black characters coming in to solve the problems of white characters in movies.
Oh, like and the magical black character.
Yes, and I think Dances with Wolves has a reputation. I've not seen it, so I can't speak on it. I've heard it's an amazing film, but I think modern film historians talk about Dances with Wolves as a magical white man comes in to try and save everything, right? It's the same thing with The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, where he goes to Japan and he learns the way of the Japanese.
Right.
And he's the only one that can save the Japanese from being destroyed because he is a smart white man.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So tell me, though, because I've not seen Dances with Wolves.
I would say there's some credibility in that argument.
Okay.
I think the main, we're going to talk about what I am a little questioning of, and then we're going to talk about some amazing things that this movie did in a second. But I think the one thing that was kind of like itching my back a little bit on this is indigenous characters always have to play the sages.
They do. That's the thing. They're the magical character.
They just come in and they're like, look, this is what the world is really about, Kevin Costner.
Right.
And Kevin Costner like learns and becomes better. And that's an interesting story if indigenous characters get to play any other characters some of the time.
Right.
But they don't. This is the thing that they get to do.
This, that's also what I've heard is like, this is just the stereotype of the noble savage, you know.
It is like, a little, it does beat into that a little bit, but I do want to talk about some things that this movie did very differently.
Okay.
And very, very well. So this movie gets a lot of points for historical research and attention to cultural detail.
Cool.
They did not need to do that.
No, they didn't.
As proven by Braveheart and Titanic, you don't need to be historically accurate if you're just interesting.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned that about the Titanic. The story of the movie never happened. Entirely fictitious.
Totally made up.
Yeah.
This movie gets a lot of points for that because not only did they actually use 3,000 buffalo for some of these incredible horseback hunting scenes, but they sourced authentic animal hide for costuming. They built accurate depictions of Sioux camping sites, and they called in Doris Leader-Charge. Do you know who Doris Leader-Charge is?
I don't.
This woman's very amazing. She was a Sioux woman and a language expert.
Okay.
So the Lakota language is what members of the Sioux Nation used to speak. It was one of the languages that the Sioux Nation used to speak. And it was on its way to extinction. Doris Leader-Charge was one of the very few people left in the world who was fluent in the language.
Wow. Okay.
Only about 1,000 people in the world speak it today. Mm-hmm. So the cast is predominantly indigenous people, but they're not Sioux people.
They're not all Sioux. Yeah.
And so they can speak their own native language, but they don't know how to speak like the Lakota language. So they called in Doris Leader-Charge. So she was a Sioux woman, and she was a community college professor in North Dakota.
Nice.
And she was a huge advocate for the Lakota language and culture. She was trying to preserve the language. And so she taught the other actors how to speak Lakota.
Wow.
And she's in the movie for a brief period of time, and she tells a story in the Lakota language. So the film is effectively preserving a dying language.
That's really
because
interesting.
When you listen to her speak, she is speaking with a full Lakota accent, and she speaks for a while, and you get to hear it. And then you get to hear other members of the tribe speak it because she taught them how to speak it.
That's really cool.
They didn't need to do that.
No, that's really cool.
It would be more Hollywood of them if they just made up words. If they just sat all these actors down and said, okay, speak in a way that sounds kind of indigenous. Can you do that? But they did all this instead, which I think is just amazing. I didn't know that a movie with Kevin Costner was going to go this hard. And also these scenes, we have to talk about the buffalo hunting scenes because they literally have indigenous actors who grew up on reservations, on horseback, hunting 3,000 buffaloes on the plains.
That's crazy.
And then they're taking animal hides and going back to accurate teepees, like building of teepees. It was so accurate to the way of life that members of the cast were like getting emotional when they first showed up on set.
Really?
Because they didn't know it was going to be like that.
Yeah.
They were like, we got cast in like this Western movie. We're going to be playing like the wise old indigenous people. Like
that we always do.
I mean, I guess it's better than playing savages, so I guess that'll be fine. And then they show up and everything is so accurate. Clearly a lot of attention to detail has been paid.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is making me emotional. This is how our ancestors lived for like hundreds of years. This is just amazing. And those hunting scenes are incredible.
Okay.
I think Kevin Costner does some of his own horseback riding. I'm sure there's a stuntman in there at some point because I'm like, that's not Kevin Costner's back. But the horsemanship in this movie is amazing.
Well, he's supposed to be a pretty good horseman, right? Because isn't he in Yellowstone in some capacity, or all the new stuff that's been going on there?
Yeah, he's in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Or he was. I think his character just got killed off.
I don't know anything about Yellowstone, but yeah.
He's so funny because he is not in the new season. But all throughout LA, they had billboards like new season of Yellowstone, and he was on them. And he was driving around LA like, I don't think I'm in this new season.
I think I remember dying in an episode.
I thought I was off that show. I got to call my agent. Right. And then the show came out, and they were like, oh, they killed me. Okay, got it. They couldn't let people know that.
Right.
But yeah, I went to USC, and I got my MFA in screen and television writing from the School of Cinematic Arts. And my thesis was a half-hour pilot with a Seneca lead. So we have to put together a pitch deck and a show Bible.
Right.
And these are just like lots of documents that you show producers that are like, hey, this is like the vision for the show, basically.
Yeah.
And that includes a cast list. So I had a Seneca lead, which is another indigenous tribe kind of based in New York State. And I was looking for indigenous actors who are like in their mid-30s that could play this role, and I literally couldn't find a single person that fit that description.
Yeah.
There's Boo Boo Stewart, who was in Twilight, but he's in his 20s. So I'm like, okay, he can be another character because there's like a younger character that needs to be indigenous as well. But I couldn't find a single 35-year-old Indigenous actor. So I just had to use an actor from the 1970s who shows up in Dances with Wolves, I'm
really?
pretty sure.
Yeah.
They're all in this movie. If you can think of any Indigenous actor, they showed up in Dances with Wolves because it requires a lot of Indigenous actors.
I was going to say, it's like the number of human beings you have to put on the screen.
Oh my God,
you have to call as far as you can get. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of the art of casting. It's like, it's not just about finding the right people for the right role. It's like, when you have a movie like this that requires so many human bodies, it's like actually going out and finding them is kind of a feat in its own right.
Yeah.
You know?
So Dances with Wolves, 1991. I don't know if it deserves Best Picture. I don't know if any movie ever deserves Best Picture, but I'm just really impressed that they bothered putting this much effort into it. That's very not Hollywood.
Nope.
So I'm
that's
impressed
the thing.
by that.
The conversation in Hollywood, especially right now and kind of the contemporary landscape, is like studios should spend more money in the right places. And that sounds like when studios used to spend money in the right places, right?
And it does lend an air of authenticity to the movie that is really difficult to ignore. Because I was about halfway through and I was like, how accurate is this? Because I know it's not based on a true story. I think it was inspired by some real life people, but it's not based on a true life story that happened. You know? No Union soldier went off and decided to join Sioux Nation, or if he did, we don't know about it.
Yeah.
So, but then I looked it up and found all this information on Doris Leader Charge and the Lakota language, and actually bringing in authentically built, handmade animal hide.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's
that's
amazing.
The thing. When film sets come to a place, they can really change the local landscape and the economy, and they can really do a lot of good if they want to. But a lot of times, studios aren't interested in doing that. They're interested in getting it done as quick as possible, as fast as possible. Like you said, any other studio probably would have gone, well, just speak Native American, right? It's like,
just speak your language.
Yeah.
And then that would mean everybody on screen is speaking 10 different languages.
Exactly.
And you would pick up on the fact that they can't understand each other.
Right.
You can tell that. If I started speaking Irish right now, you could just be nodding and smiling. Everybody would know, he doesn't know what the fuck she's saying.
Exactly.
Everybody would know that.
Exactly.
Anyway. 1990. Driving Miss Daisy.
Driving Miss Daisy.
I did not want to watch this movie. I think it gave me another autoimmune disease. A black man drives an angry white lady around, and character change happens, supposedly.
So, not Liam Neeson.
Morgan Freeman.
I almost said Morgan Stanley.
Get a grip. Oh my God, that head cold.
Morgan Freeman, that's right. Yes.
Watching this feels like watching dust gather on a high bookshelf. It feels like sitting in a porch swing whose cushions are soaked through with rain from the previous spring. It feels like an unrelenting summer day here in Los Angeles if all of the trees had burned down so there's not even a thumbful of shade. That's what I wrote about Driving Miss Daisy.
Oh, you really didn't like Driving Miss Daisy?
I don't even think I finished it.
Really?
To be honest. I think I got about halfway through and I said, I hate this.
So you don't think it deserved to win Best Picture?
No. I'm so sick of Hollywood trying to prove that they're not racist by just nominating movies that deal with race in some way.
In some capacity.
I'm like, that doesn't mean that it was dealt with well or cleverly or did anything. It just means you cast Morgan Freeman.
Well, it's very similar to another movie on this list, which is Green Book, if you'll remember. It's the same kind of thing, except I believe it's reversed, where a white guy is driving a black character.
Yeah.
Right?
I guarantee you some studio exec pitched that movie that way.
Probably.
It's like Driving Miss Daisy, but the white guy's driving.
Yeah.
Why not a white lady? Anyway. Yeah, I don't even want to talk about this movie anymore. It was so boring.
I've never seen it.
Do you have anything? Oh, you don't? Great. You don't need to.
Okay.
1989. Rain Man.
Rain Man.
A yuppie is remiss to learn that his wealthy father has awarded his estate to his autistic brother.
That's right.
The only thing I wrote is the casting is doing the heavy lifting here.
Yes, very much. It's Tom Cruise and
Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman, that's right.
Dustin Hoffman. Okay, I've seen The Graduate. I've seen Meyerowitz Stories. I've seen Dustin Hoffman here and there, and for some reason just never really paid him any mind. I was just like, oh yeah, he's good. After watching all of these movies on this list, anytime Dustin Hoffman shows up, I am relieved.
Yeah.
I'm like, thank God, I'm in good hands.
Yeah, you know you're going to be taken care of.
He takes care of you.
Yeah.
He's an amazing actor. I don't know why I wasn't giving him credit before. I think I was just spoiled growing up watching great movies and just thought that's how every actor is. Every actor takes care of you and is telling a great story every minute that they're on screen and is full of thought and care.
And then you work in indie film and you realize not every actor is very good at their job.
Most of them are just okay looking.
Yeah.
They're just slightly better looking than your average coffee shop patron.
Yes.
That's what most actors are.
Yeah, Dustin Hoffman is a bit of a sleeper because
Absolutely.
I would say he's not like Leonardo DiCaprio, where Leonardo DiCaprio has these big scenes and we think of cinematic moments with him crying and drooling and screaming. Dustin Hoffman never does that, but he's always really solid at what he does do.
It's much more nuanced acting.
It is.
It's like your brother said something that is not necessarily aggressive or rude, but it could be interpreted that way. So then when you say your next line, you need to keep in mind, like, are we arguing? Are we about to start? Is he angry with me? Am I angry at him? I don't know. And he's doing that the whole time. You can feel his mind turning in a very realistic way. And it's interesting. I think Tom Hanks is well cast here. I think Tom Hanks is best cast when he's playing an asshole.
Yeah.
I think he just nails that. He's like, okay, you're quick talking, cool, yuppie dude.
So you said Tom Hanks. You meant Tom Cruise.
I meant Tom Cruise. I'm sorry. Tom Hanks is best cast when he's playing my dad.
Yeah, not an asshole.
Yeah, just a sweet Walt Disney character, you know?
Yes, Tom Cruise, when he plays an asshole, it's pretty cool for him. I think he can really dig into that.
He totally does.
Yeah.
But I do think Dustin Hoffman acts circles around him in this movie.
Which is funny because he's the autistic brother.
Yeah.
He doesn't really have much agency in the film, right?
No. But I think there's an honesty about that character and about Dustin Hoffman's portrayal of that character that Tom Cruise could never match.
Interesting.
Because he lives on another planet.
Yeah. Yeah, the two of them on screen is honestly very enjoyable to watch, though.
Very.
They play very well together.
They do. They're bouncing off of each other, but I get the feeling that they're playing different games, which I think for Rain Man works amazingly.
Yeah, it works perfectly.
Right?
Yeah. I know that Rain Man is one of those movies that is kind of ironed into the zeitgeist of film and culture, right?
Yeah.
Where you see it referenced in a lot of other pieces of media, right? Like The Hangover was the one that most famously did it with Zach Galifianakis and Bradley Cooper, where they try to win some money back.
Exactly.
You know, it's a good time. I really like that movie. Is that also Robert Zemeckis that directed Rain Man?
I don't think so.
No?
I'm not entirely sure who directed that one.
Well, Rain, check it. I'll put it on screen.
Yeah. All right. Okay. The 80s were not my favorite decade.
I don't think the 80s are good movies at all.
They're
a lot of people think
nobody's
it
favorite
is,
decade.
but yeah.
But you got to think, like, right, the 70s, golden age of film.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's not even up for debate.
No.
That's not an opinion.
No,
The best movies came out in the 70s so far. So then you get into a dry spell in the 80s where, like, we don't really know what to do. We're like, holy shit, we just made good movies for 10 years. How about we try something different?
Yeah. How about we try making bad movies?
1988, The Last Emperor. Have you ever heard of this movie?
I've heard of it. I have not seen it.
I had not heard of it.
Is it a romance movie?
I started this thing. Not even at all.
No?
It chronicles the life of the last emperor of the Chinese Empire who now suffers in anonymity in a communist prison.
Oh, interesting.
I wrote, technically a movie, emotionally a blank piece of construction paper. This movie was long and I didn't care. There wasn't one character that I can name that I wanted to hug. There was no sexual tension. There's no amazing fight scene that sticks in my mind. There's some cool set pieces, but I mostly just want to set them on fire for being a part of this movie. I hated this movie.
Okay. So you don't see why it was nominated and won Best Picture.
I think it was just the biggest movie that was made that year. I have to believe this was a rough year for the Oscars. And it's just like, well, this movie put in the most effort.
Yeah.
So we're going to give it to them.
Well, that's, you and I said this last time we were talking about these movies, where it's like a lot of times Best Picture, when you win an Oscar, typically the Oscar, it's not about the best of whatever. It's the most of whatever, right?
Yes.
It's the most movie that year.
It's the most movie that year.
Yeah.
And a biopic is a really easy way to win an Oscar.
There's a reason people keep making them, and it's because they work.
I think there's a theme that we have in every movie we've talked about so far, just about man in history suffering. If you can just write a movie like that, you can win an Oscar.
Yeah.
And that's this movie. And I just don't care. Really, anytime the word empire is mentioned, I check out. I don't want to know about the empire.
Fair enough.
You've never seen this movie?
No.
I don't need to.
Okay.
What I will say something nice about it is it cuts back and forth to time. So like he's in prison now, but then it cuts back to like times when he was a child and he was the emperor. And like the flashback scenes are bright red and warm and they feel like summertime. You can feel him viewing it through like rose-colored glasses of childhood.
That's cool.
And then it cuts to him in a communist prison, and it's just concrete and blue, and it's miserable.
Not many places I'd want to be less than a communist prison.
Yeah. So like visually, like there are stunning elements of this film, but that's the only thing I can say about it.
That sounds kind of like Hero. Did you ever see that movie? I think it's an Asian, not art house movie, but it's a kind of an action movie. Similar thing where a character is telling a story about his life, and each season of his life is like kind of in a different color palette, and as he's accomplishing missions and things like that. Hero's very famous in like the fight choreography space because of the absolute intense work they did to coordinate the entire movie.
Yeah.
And really well done. It's a good movie if anybody watches that. And probably better than what was this one? The Last Emperor?
Exactly. What was this one? That's a good way to sum it up. All right. 1987. Best Picture goes to Platoon.
Platoon.
During the height of the Vietnam War, two sergeants pit their platoon against one another. This movie is physically beautiful and emotionally brutal. I wrote, you will need a long shower after watching this, but that's true for most Nam movies, isn't it?
Yeah.
This movie is just devastating, uncomfortable, tense.
Really?
There are some movies, and you just experienced this, that just make me angry.
Yeah.
It's like the storyline. Okay, there are two things that can happen when this happens. Either the movie is so poorly made and badly put together that I get angry that any money was spent on it, or like the subject matter is so upsetting that I start to get angry. And Platoon is the latter. It's just one guy wants to like burn every village and kill every civilian and is just pissed off. And then another sergeant is like, no, dude, let's just do our job and go home.
Yeah.
And I'm angry the whole time.
The whole time. Yeah.
It's Willem Dafoe. Hello. He's here. That's a good part of this movie. I wrote Willem Dafoe, Willem da freaking pro, more like.
Isn't Charlie Sheen in this movie too?
Yes.
Yes, that's right. I remember when he got in trouble all those years ago. He was talking about, I was in Platoon. Like, that was a big thing for some reason.
I don't know.
Do you remember when Charlie Sheen got in trouble?
I don't. For saying he was in Platoon.
No, he got in trouble for doing a lot of drugs.
Oh, well, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Which that was upsetting to me. Like, I couldn't really put my finger on why that whole media circus was making me upset. And then Emilio Estevez came forward and he was like, he was asked by Ellen, of all people, like, how are you feeling about this whole thing? And Emilio was like, you have to keep in mind, like, this is my family.
Right.
That's my brother.
Right.
And he's doing a lot of drugs.
I don't want to talk about it.
It's really hard.
It's really hard. Yeah.
My dad and I are working really hard to try to help him out.
Right.
But a lot of people understand that you can't do anything when somebody's living like that.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing. People forget. I think time moves so fast we forget about television shows. I know we're talking about movies, but 2.5 Men was the biggest show on television when it was at its height. Like, it really was. And Charlie Sheen and the whole cast was like superstars in America.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, I just remember that interview where he was like, winning. He talked about being in Platoon as well.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I know about Platoon.
Charlie Sheen is wonderful in this movie.
Is he?
I wrote, there's nothing this man can't do, but I wrote that about Willem Dafoe. Unlike some other miserable movies that have won this category, there are moments of levity, beauty, hope, and sweetness, and it makes the pain hurt more.
Interesting.
I think Charlie Sheen is responsible for most of those moments of sweetness because he plays the sweet character.
Oh,
to me,
okay.
in my head.
See, I thought Platoon was like an action movie. I didn't know it had this kind of like big heart to it about like what it's doing.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to have it if you're going to argue like we're in the Vietnam War.
Right.
What do you do? Do you just destroy as much as you possibly can because it's war?
Right.
Or do you try to reserve some amount of humanity for the people who didn't ask for you to be there? And like Charlie Sheen represents that latter half. And also Charlie Sheen is one of the younger guys in the cast, or at least in the platoon. And so he has that like kid heart that you play. And I just hate it. I hate seeing a sweet man in war. Can we stop doing? I'm always upset when that's happening.
Yeah.
I'm like, can we get this kid into Yale? Can we get him out of there? Get him home.
Right.
Get Charlie Sheen out of Vietnam.
Bring Charlie Sheen back.
Give him back. So yeah, this movie was absolutely brutal, and I never want to watch it again. But it is very sweet, and I think this was the last big Vietnam movie that got made, which makes sense because it came out in '86, one in '87.
Right.
That's pretty late. That gives you about a 20-year.
That is pretty late. Yeah, because the Vietnam is featured in other movies, but it's not it's featured in Forrest Gump, but it's not the entire movie.
Right.
You know,
there were other movies that got made about Vietnam, the tons of movies that got made about Vietnam earlier, but this is kind of the last one on that.
One of the last.
It's kind of like what is it? Out of Time in America or something. I'll put up a poster, but it's Robert De Niro, and it was really like the last mafia movie that got made, and it was the last mafia movie that got made because it was not pro-mafia. It was like, this is what it's really like to be in the mafia. We need to be very honest about what it's like. And a lot of movies like that got made about Vietnam. And so at some point it was just like, I think we can all agree Vietnam was brutal and awful. I think we're all aligned on that. So then we started making The Last Emperor. And we moved on to some other movie junk. All right. Oh, we're still in the 80s. God, kill me. 1986, Out of Africa.
I've not even heard of this movie.
One of the only true romances to win this category.
Okay.
Trying to read the plot of this movie ahead of time was an absolute trip. It's like I threw my keyboard into a washing machine. Even now, I can't really tell you what this movie was about. Robert Redford and Meryl Streep fall in love.
Okay, I like that cast.
Robert Redford. I'm a taken woman. I got nothing to say about it. The whole plot is like Meryl Streep is engaged to this other guy, but then he loses his job, so then he can't. So then she goes to Africa and she kind of falls in love with this tour guide, but then Robert Redford's there and she's like, oh my God, I got so many men to choose from. What do I do? And then they're wandering around in shorts and they're just taking pictures of elephants, I think, at some point. And then Robert Redford is gorgeous. And she's like, well, I don't know, who do I want to be with? Robert Redford, this guy who looks like a toe. It's really hard for me to choose. And then they're in Africa.
Yeah, and then she picks Robert Redford probably.
Who cares? Again, I think this was just the most movie.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen this movie?
No, I haven't even heard of it.
Well, you're better off for it. Let's move on, please. I want to get through this decade. This decade sucks. 1985, Amadeus. Mozart is a musical genius and therefore the object of an older composer's resentment. Mozart was a prodigy. He played for members of the royal class when he was only 8 years old. So what happens? Well, he was abused by his father. That's how that happened.
Yeah.
He got Michael Jackson into being a creative genius. So what happens when he reaches his 20s? Cocaine and late night parties with any ankle-bearing woman on the block. And this movie is about all of that. Amadeus is objectively good. All the structure and conflict is there. I just don't care enough about the subject matter to stay engaged.
Yeah.
It's still quite stuffy.
Right.
Because we're talking about England and we're talking about classical music
and composers
and we're talking about composers, and there's just no way to not be dusty about that.
Right.
It's like that movie Conclave with Ray Fiennes. At some point I will watch it because I got to support my second husband.
Right.
But I just don't see a world in which you make a movie about priests that doesn't feel like a movie about priests.
Right. Yeah, it's tricky because I do think that is an interesting time period. Like Amadeus Mozart is obviously a very interesting person, right? His life has been studied across time because of the impact that he's had on culture generally. So there's something there that's obviously kind of naturally magnetic. But you're right. I think ultimately it's like watching stuff about the crown, like the royal English family, where it's like, okay, yeah, rich people having problems. I get it.
I tried watching The Crown, but the last episode I watched was, these episodes are an hour long. And one episode was entirely about which last name she was going to take.
Rough. That's rough.
Oh. I have diabetes. Like the world is big. Things are happening. You want me to care for an hour about you being a Mountbatten? Nobody cares about you being a Mountbatten.
Yeah.
There is something, I also wrote, there's something about this movie that feels dusty and slow moving and disingenuous, and maybe that was purposeful, but either way, I am not interested in spending time on a movie that feels dishonest and kind of goofy. And also, I'm not a fan of movies that want to feel disingenuous on purpose.
Do you think it feels disingenuous on purpose?
A little bit. There are parts of it that feel that way.
What do you think the disingenuousness is doing?
I think it's coming from Mozart's character, where I'm like, I think it would be more compelling if he was genuinely a 10-year-old in a 30-year-old's body. That would make sense to me because I'm like, when you were 10, you were getting beaten by your father if you messed up on the piano.
Right.
So now you're 30 and your father is dead and you're rich and famous. You're going to act like a 10-year-old. You're not going to act like a 30-year-old.
Yeah.
But I felt like there were some scenes where I'm like, it feels like he's acting like a 10-year-old. I want him to be 10 years old. I care way more about that character than about a 30-year-old who's acting like a kid.
Right.
There's a difference there.
There is.
And it's like when movies try to confuse their audience. I'm like, why do you want to confuse the audience? They want to spend time with you. Mm-hmm. Why would you punish them for that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel similarly about this movie. This was my high school boyfriend's favorite movie.
Oh.
So he showed it to me when we were in high school, and I was like, yeah. And I watched it again when I was at USC because, again, Milo, what's his name? The director of this movie, Milos. He went to USC and is like a USC darling. So he directed a couple of Oscar winners.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like you always get every couple of years you get a composer, a conductor movie, right? Like Bradley Cooper had that one recently about him being a conductor. I forget the guy's name, but
Leonard Cohen.
Leonard Cohen, is that it? Yeah. And I think it's like every 7 years we get another conductor, composer, classical.
Yeah, Bradley Cooper wants to be a genius.
He does.
That's all I'll say about that. 1984, we have one of my mom's favorite movies, Terms of Endearment.
Terms of Endearment.
Chronicles the evolving relationship between mother and daughter from childhood to adolescence to adulthood. We quote this movie every single day in my house. Mm-hmm. Shirley MacLaine makes up for any gaps in the script or dips in energy. She is like Dustin Hoffman. She is very special. She is a special actress. Are you familiar with Shirley MacLaine at all?
No, not at all.
She was also in The Apartment, which is another Oscar winner from the 60s that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
So she's been making good movies for a long time. She was also in Steel Magnolias, which is one of my other favorite movies.
You and your mom love that movie.
We do. Yeah. Shirley MacLaine is an absolute spectacle. And I think she and this other main actress whose name I'm forgetting, I think it's Deborah Winger, they act really beautifully off of each other. There's just the right amount of tension. Mother-daughter relationships are fraught with tension and passive aggressiveness, and I think they capture that really beautifully in this movie. It's genuinely giggle to myself funny. Her son-in-law's name is Flap. That's so fucking funny. I'll never make a joke that funny. The son-in-law's name is Flap. It's awesome. I fucking love that. Anyway, it's thinly plotted. It's not really about plot. So if you're the type of viewer who likes a snowball running down a hill and you need like story and like some action, like this is not going to be the movie for you. This is really about like the relationship between mother and daughter changing over time. There is some story, but it's like a life unfolding.
Yeah.
So it's not so punchy and bullet points and she goes to college, so then she has to sleep with her roommate, and then because of that, she and her mom have to argue about lesbianism. Like, it's not like that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, this movie sprinted so Lady Bird could belly crawl.
Interesting. I know we've talked about Lady Bird before.
It's not the movie for me. I'm not the target audience. Actually, I am, but I didn't like it. So I think that's why I was a little angry about it at the time. I was angry about everything at that time. Anyway, let's get through the 80s, shall we? 1983. Gandhi,
another biopic.
About a man suffering.
Yes, that's
actions of his own consequences. A former attorney turns his attention to the plight facing the Indian people living in South Africa. I wrote long period, unmemorable period.
Apparently that year they liked it. So.
How do you feel about Gandhi?
Never saw it.
All right, let's move on.
It was one of those movies I was like, I'm not really interested.
Well, we got another bad movie here. 1982, Chariots of Fire.
I've heard about Chariots of Fire.
Two British track athletes, one Jewish and the other Christian, are driven to win in the 1924 Olympics. Now, I am not the audience for this movie.
No.
But honestly, I don't really know who is. I think if you have an inspirational quotes board on your Pinterest, you might dig this.
Yeah, that's... So I used to be a big runner. I'm trying to get back into running after kind of an injury, but I know Chariots of Fire because it's one of the few like track movies that exists that was pretty good and lauded and that kind of thing.
Well, and the thing is, I think there's a reason there's not a lot of track movies because it's not that interesting to watch people run in a circle.
It isn't. No, and that's the thing. It's hard to find that subject matter very compelling.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not a runner or if you don't run track or if you've never run track, like that kind of thing.
Well, there's that element. And then it's also if you're not religious.
Right.
And also like the whole plot of this movie. Now, I'm vaguely remembering this. This is like a LaCroix living in my mind. I barely remember it. But I don't know if that conflict of them being Christian or Jewish ever really they don't conflict with each other. they're conflicting in their own life. Like I think the Jewish student receives like anti-Semitic comments and like has to get support from his family, and it's very like lonely and isolating in that way. And then the Christian athlete like has to miss mass so that he can go to practice or something. And I'm just, who fucking cares? Does God care if you miss your fucking track meet? I don't know. Oh, God. Who cares? Who cares? God? He's not busy? There's not bone cancer to cure? He's looking after your ass? God! I'm so bored. Let's move on. Finally, a good movie. It's been 10 years of trash. 1981, Ordinary People.
Ordinary People.
This is a fucking movie, everybody. A formerly happy family starts to disintegrate after the oldest brother and son is killed in a boating accident. This movie rocks my boat so hard.
You showed me this movie.
Yes, this is everything I want out of a movie. I watch it every year, multiple times a year, and I cry every time. It never stops being beautiful. It is the Pamela Anderson of movies.
Yeah, you love this movie in a lot of ways.
I love this movie. How do you feel about this movie?
I liked it when we watched it. I just remember thinking like, man, this movie is unlike most movies I've seen. It's very small. It's very contained. Yes. It felt like a Noah Baumbach film almost.
A little bit.
You know, it's like,
but more earnest.
More earnest. That's the thing. And I would say more contained than Noah Baumbach film.
Yeah.
You know?
It is based on a book, and it feels like that. It feels like you're reading a novella.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's very contained.
It feels like a very quiet Sunday, rainy afternoon when you're reading on the couch, and it's a sad book.
Donald Sutherland is in this movie. Mary Tyler Moore is in this movie. Timothy Hutton puts in the performance of a freaking lifetime in this movie. I love this. This is all I want. I just want characters struggling and trying their best. That is what I want. I don't need big epic. I don't need God involved. I just want a boy doing his best.
Yeah.
Great movie.
And I think this movie accomplishes that. Oh, excuse me.
Oh my God. You're fading here.
I'm doing fine. Ordinary People, I just remember really enjoying, and then I was really happy that you showed it to me because it's not a movie I would have watched on my own, I don't think.
No.
You know,
my mom, I think, introduced me to this movie because she loves dysfunctional family movies. And so she recommended, we had watched, I think, every other dysfunctional family movie.
I see.
And I hadn't seen Ordinary People, and we watched it together, and I was like, yes, this is a raindrop in a jar. I love this movie. Absolutely gorgeous, this film. All right. 1980, Kramer versus Kramer. When a successful executive's wife abruptly leaves him, he must learn to care for his teeny tiny son all by himself. Now, I've heard stories of what it was like to work on this set, and it is, I'll be honest, difficult to not let that color my perception of this movie. I heard stories that Meryl Streep was treated very poorly on this set.
Okay.
I think at several times Dustin Hoffman hit her.
Oh my God.
Without warning her that was going to happen, and he got the okay to do that from the director.
That's a no-go.
So not loving that.
No.
So it is hard for me to like cast that aside. I know I was singing his praises earlier. He's a wonderful actor. Doesn't mean he's a good man. It's just like James Cameron. He knows how to operate a camera. Bad husband.
Right. Well, and this is also the film industry 40 years ago. Yeah. It was a much different beast.
1980, you can get away with hitting Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
Insane. I will say Dustin Hoffman plays a very particular, fussy, obnoxious, lovable man. I totally believe him all the way through. He doesn't waver for a second. This is an amazing performance. And the only person that can rightfully challenge that stature is Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
Who plays a tender, confused, like soul-searching ex-wife. That character on the page is really easy to hate.
Yes.
You the movie's kind of built for you to root against her. But she shows up and you can't help but feel for her.
I think that's the magnetism of Meryl Streep as an actress.
Yes, it's totally to her credit because on paper, not built that way.
Yeah.
And the director clearly didn't think very much of this character or maybe of women. And same thing with Dustin Hoffman. It only has soul because Meryl Streep shows up and like injects it into her, and she does a really beautiful job.
I know. I think this is a tough thing for people who aren't in the film industry and who haven't read a script or made a film. It's hard for them to understand, but like, the thing that you end up with on the page is a lot different than the thing you end up with on screen. And part of the skill of a filmmaker, or part of the skill of filmmaking generally, is being able to make that translation happen in a way that makes sense. Because you're right. It's like when you read the script for Kramer versus Kramer, it doesn't come out the same as watching the movie of Kramer versus Kramer.
At all.
So how does that's what we talk about when we talk about like having a filmmaker's eye, is understanding where the moments are and how to adjust things to make them cohesive.
Yes.
All around.
And also, I think brings up the conversation that you and I have all the time, which is our criticism of studio execs.
Yeah.
Where you kind of have to take a gamble. Because you take a look at the script for a movie like Kramer versus Kramer, and you think nobody is going to be rooting for the ex-wife. This isn't a very interesting story.
Right.
It's not like Marriage Story, which is basically a retelling of Kramer versus Kramer,
sure.
but placed in Hollywood. But I think on paper that movie looks and sounds very different. And I think it does take a creative person being like, you have to trust me. Meryl Streep is going to add a layer to this character that we need. Whatever you think is lacking, I promise you it's going to show up. Because there's no way to promise that that's going to show. It's kind of a gamble.
It is.
Because if Meryl Streep just had an off day, or she fell through, or she had to, she had a child and had to go to Cambodia for some reason, then who else can play that part? No one else can play that part. I'm absolutely convinced.
Right. And that's the thing. We hear about writers and directors writing movies for specific actors in mind.
Yes.
Right. And those movies end up usually being okay because the entire crux of the kind of the construction of the film is based around that actor doing the thing that they do best.
Right.
And that's where a director is really kind of king for some things, because the directors are supposed to think on actors. That's their whole job, is working with actors. That's your
most important job.
Yeah, and it's understanding how actors work and function and what their strengths are and how they get through a scene and how they can bring certain things to a scene that you might not otherwise have on the page.
Yeah, and this movie is really wonderfully, seamlessly directed.
Really?
Really. I mean, seriously, there's not a weak point, not a weak second. It's incredible what they were able to do with this movie. I think this movie warrants a watch, even if you don't care about dysfunctional families, you don't care about the divorce story, totally understand. I think this movie is worth watching just to watch Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep bounce off of each other. It's like watching NHL playoff hockey. There's no way to have a bad time. Like that's the pro. That's as good as it gets. It does not get better than Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep and Kramer versus Kramer.
No, those two are unbelievable. Kramer versus Kramer, I think that's a good place to stop.
Yeah, we just got to 1980.
So that's another 20 years of cinema history that we've had to go through.
You're welcome.
You really watched a lot. I know you said you didn't watch all of them, but up to at least 1980, you've watched every single one.
Yes. And now that we are spacing this out into different episodes, I think I'll have time to watch the last couple movies that I didn't get around to in the first round.
Oh boy. I know it's going to be a lot of episodes about the best pictures.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to cut this together or release it, but we'll figure it out.
That's okay.
So don't even worry about it.
Look,
we'll take care of you, okay?
The good thing about not having a big audience yet is that we get to kind of do whatever we want.
All right, everybody. We are going to come back to you when our camera is freshly loaded and I have peed and Connor is not sick.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep chatting about movies. Next time we see you, we're going to pick up in 1979 and we are going to talk about the golden age of cinema.
Oh, I can't wait. The 1970s are very exciting for cinema.
Very excited.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that we're out of the 80s, by the way. Thanks for sticking
The 80s are tough.
through that decade. That was rough.
The 80s are tough.
All right, bye, guys. We'll talk soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.